This is Season 2, Episode 3 of Mastering the RPG, a tabletop RPG podcast all about upping your game. Doesn't matter if you're a game master or player, you'll find advice, ideas, and some strong opinions. Tonight's episode, Rival Adventuring Parties, or You Beat Me to the Punch. Welcome again to Mastering the RPG. As I said, we're all about maximizing your game with advice, ideas, cool stuff sound, emails, strong opinions, all that good stuff. I'm Carl with my co-hosts Eric and James. You'll find information about the show at masteringtherpg.com. You can send us email or feedback or questions at gamemaster@masteringtherpg.com. Both of those are one word. So tonight we're missing our Eric. He's not here. He's had another important thing that he had to take care of, another matter. And but I got James here, so it's just us tonight. How you feeling tonight, James?
G'day, Carl. Yeah, I'm good. Just the two rivals ready to go. This is going to be fun.
So that leads into we are going to talk about rival adventuring parties tonight, but we do have an email. Tonight we got an email from Gary. Thank you, Gary. Let's read that out. He's got a question. He mentions, I've been playing and GMing tabletop RPGs since about 1978, and you guys all give me things to consider and contemplate. Well, I appreciate that. I really enjoyed the last show. Currently, I'm playing one game of Deadlands. Must be Savage Worlds. Yes, Savage Worlds. And running one public game and at a local game store. The one I'm playing online with old Navy buddies from the 80s. We all know each other pretty well, so the game is easier, and he puts that in quotes. The one at the store is a little challenging. When I ask them how the game is going and what they want from it, mostly I get, it's all fine, we are happy. While on the surface, this is great, it doesn't tell me a lot. Part of the issue might be that this is a public game. Public games have fluctuating players as well as a small core group. Here's the question. I'm wondering what your guys' take on pulling out more robust responses from a group like this might be. How do we get those better responses than it's okay, it's fine? James, what do you think? This one's got a nice one that question. You know all about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, and I've talked about this in the past with in other broadcasts as well. But great question, and it's often difficult because to tease out some really quality information from your players, they might not know what they're more interested in, or what they might be, or what could be improved. And generally, let's face it, TTRPGs are fun, and if they're having a good time, well, why mess with it? But one of the things I have mentioned in past podcasts is this idea of stars and wishes. I grabbed it from Sly Furish, who's one of my kind of touchstones and where I get a lot of my information. And this is how to kind of solve an open-ended question. Like, are you having a good time? Is there anything that I could change? Both yes and no answers. The use of stars and wishes, I think, is a good way to gauge how the characters are seeing, how the players are seeing the game, and what they're looking forward to. So the question I ask all of my games about once every 6 weeks or so is, what's been the best thing that's happened in the game in your mind in the last 6 weeks? And this can be for your core group, but it could be for players that drop in and drop out. And the nature of their response when they have to think about that, though, and you might need to prompt them a little bit more. What's been the best scene? Where have you had the most fun? It then allows you to get a sense of what type of player they are and what they've enjoyed. And so it's kind of a repeatable thing. So I've got a group that, when I asked this for last week, have come back with, we really love downtime activities that go a little bit awry. We like to have that breathing space between adventure modules. The other one is a wish, and this might be a little bit tricky. You might get not quite as many good responses, but what do you wish would happen in the next 6 weeks? That, to me, can be we want more combat, or I'd like a magical weapon, or something like this. But it does give you an insight into what the player is looking for out of the game, what kind of player they might be. So for me, stars and wishes, asking those two questions is the easy way to do it. There's
And,
other things too that you might consider in terms of asking. In there's some logistical issues about the game play, like, is the setup okay? Are you enjoying playing in the store? Is it too noisy? How can we change? Are the time frames right? There's those kind of questions that you can coax out as well. But for me, it's those two big ones. It's stars and wishes.
and,
The
and
other thing that I've been asking lately of my players has been in far more game mechanical stuff, which has also been very helpful. I haven't played Deadlands in 25 years, so I'm not sure whether it translates very well, but it is asking them what are items, powers, what other things would you like for your character. And the other thing that I've been doing lately is asking the players to tell the other players of the cool things that their character might have just developed into. So, hey, why don't you tell us the great new spell that you... what's your favourite spell out of the new ones that you learned? Or what is the new ability that you're most happy about now that you've leveled up? All of these questions kind of give you an idea about what kind of player they are and what kind of thing they might be enjoying into the future. Gary said he was long-winded. I think I'm even more long-winded. I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit. What do you think, Carl?
well, the only thing I think that was brilliant. The only thing that I would add, just to really clarify, is the thing with stars and wishes. That the takeaway is it's all positive, right? What did you like?
Yeah.
What would you like more of, or not? Well, this was bad. What was bad about the game? It was all about what did you enjoy and what could you enjoy more if we did more of it. So I think that makes it easier for people to I think talk. People like to be more positive than negative generally, I think. So that's the great thing about stars and wishes. But otherwise, I think you handled it brilliantly. Honestly, James, good stuff.
No worries. Thanks for the email, Gary. Keep them coming.
Yep, we love them. We love them. So, we don't have any cool stuff today. There's plenty out there, I'm sure, but we're going to go right into our main topic.
Mastering the RPG with Carl, Eric, and James. Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome to the main topic. Tonight, again, as I mentioned, we are going to talk about rival adventuring parties. Now, the obvious question that comes up right away is, what do we mean by a rival adventuring party? And I'll throw mine in right away. What I always talk about is another group of adventurers that are going after the same goal or some contrary goals. Classic could be a different set of runners in Cyberpunk, could be a rival group of bandits in Deadlands, for example. Could be just a good old-fashioned adventuring party going after the same loot. Could be families in an intrigue game of the courts. Could be a lot of things. But in the end, they're going to be interacted with, and they're going to be part of this overall narrative. They're not just the big bad evil guy. So I'm maybe jumping ahead a little bit. James, what do you think? What do you mean when you think of a rival adventuring party?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that mirror, isn't it? It's the mirror of your adventurers that is kind of a similar vein to the adventuring party, but in conflict or in competition with them, in a rivalry that you're hoping will take place over a protracted period of time. It's not necessarily the other group of adventurers in the bar when the bar brawl breaks out, but it's more about this kind of group that you will be competing against in a section of your campaign. When I think of rivals, I think of I immediately am drawn to Belloc and Indiana Jones in my thinking of what a rival might be, because they're after similar things with similar resources, and they're equally matched against each other. The other fun one that I was thinking about when I was thinking about a rival adventuring party, I don't know if you guys have seen these films over in the States. We're in love with with British comedy here in Australia. So there's a fantastic movie called Shaun of the Dead, where
very popular in the States too. Yeah,
where their group happens upon an almost identical group of adventurers when they're trying to make it back to the pub for zombies. So it's this kind of it's not necessarily enemies. It's rivals where you could have different interactions with them, not necessarily only combat interactions.
So very, it's a very cool concept, and we're going to explore it a little bit more. But why? So why is it interesting? I say it's an interesting concept, but what makes it interesting from a campaign Why would you want to do this as a game master? Sounds like a lot of work. So what's so interesting about it? What do you think, James?
Well, it's different in that it is interesting. I mean, for me, there's a whole heap of reasons why you would use this.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons is it adds time pressure or a level of urgency. So I guess let's think about this in a number of different ways. And I've run rival adventuring parties in a couple of games that I've in the past year. One was a rival set of courtiers in a court situation on a game called Court of the Shadow Fae, which was a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons game. And so they had a rival group of political machinations that they had to work against. The most recent one that I'm running at the moment is from Critical Role, where they've published an adventure called Call of the Netherdeep, which has an established rival group of adventurers. So why would you put this in your game? For me, it's the main reason is there's 3 main reasons for me. The first one is it adds a level of time pressure and urgency to what your players will do, in that if you don't achieve what the players are setting out to achieve before the rivals do, then you will fail. So if we look at the Indiana Jones example, if you don't find the Ark of the Covenant before Belloc does, then you're in a whole heap of trouble. So that's number one, which is it just pushes players and the characters to achieve their goals a lot quicker. Would you agree, Carl? That's on your list?
I think that definitely is one of the number ones. There is it you can't languish about you. There's something going on, and it's going to go on whether you do something or not. And so that gives another source. What that means is that there's a source of a living world aspect it brings to the table as well. And that's always a challenge, right? To make your world not seem static, where when the adventurers appear, the world starts spinning, and when they disappear, everything just stops. We don't want that.
Yes.
We want something that feels like it's a living world, that these things are going on. And an rival adventuring party very much can provide that feeling, right? Because things happen. You didn't get there in time. They got there in time. Something happened. You went to the shop. Stuff wasn't there that you thought was going to be there because the rival adventuring party came and cleared them out of healing potions before you ever got there. The world is alive. So that's kind of a second one. And then that leads to adventuring hooks. That's the last one. It's really finding and thwarting the rival's plans become now something that the players want to do. They're going to make that decision because basically the rivals are ticking them off, and it's time we take care of this issue, and we get ahead of them, and we can't sit around, and we can't just wait for danger to come to us. We have to go after it. So those are kind of the big ones I think about. What do you, James? Is there anything else you think about that?
It's such a strong motivation, isn't it? Where if you don't thwart the rival, then you're coming second in your own game, which is it's something, in role playing games, it's not overly a competitive thing, and we tend to be a collaborative group against a big bad evil guy. And this adds another level of competition where it provides a really fertile ground for adventure hooks. I want to go back to your second point, though, Carl, because for me, this is the main reason why you would run a rival group. It really, really brings the world to life, because essentially what you're doing is you're introducing a group of players a group of characters in which you'll be role-playing, and you're role-playing different religions, you're role-playing different factions, you're role-playing different races, you're role-playing different classes. You're kind of providing a whole heap of deep world-building lore that can come through these guys, So in Courts of the Shadow Fae, for example, there was a rival court. I was able to do a lot of great role play about what the different political feeling was between this rival and what the nuance is in the world. In Call of the Netherdeep, there are religious differences that you're able to really talk through about. There's a fanaticism that goes on with the rivals that allows you to really set up some more description of the world than you might normally do. It allows you to do some direct RP that really brings your world building to the fore. And I think it's amazing technique to not necessarily lore dump, but make your lore live through these diverse characters that you'll be playing when you role play a rival group.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I mean, the fact that you can dole out lore and information about the setting through somebody who's part of the setting, as opposed to, like you say, just a dump of out of character descriptions and out of character. Well, you guys know this. Well, now you do know it because you RP'd with another group from another place who has similar goals. Maybe they're rivals, and so they're giving information out that that your players now think, hey, they gave something away they shouldn't have gave away, and look at what we know now, and it adds that intrigue. So it's very cool. I think I've only run in a rival party once, and it was just a heap of fun because in this group the goals were identical. So it was a race to the end. So you think of like the Indiana Jones example. They were going after multiple parts of the same, think of the rod of many parts kind of thing, right? They were looking for the same sort of things. And if one got it before the others, now they have to work together or they have to interact with each other to somehow, somebody's got to end up with all of them. But how do they do that? In a way that's interesting. And that leads almost to the guidance on what
Call of the Netherdeep is identical too, by the way. Call of the Netherdeep, the rivalry is about a magical item, and that magical item changes hands as the rivalry continues. So, if the group end up with it, then the rivals will try and steal it in the night. If the rivals end up with it, then the group's going to try and steal it in the night. So it kind of builds onto each other so that there's multiple interactions with these rivals as the campaign goes, competing for the same item. It's great. It's a really good setup.
And does that adventure, so I'm just fascinated now. So it provides those opportunities for people to steal, or they're close enough to each other continuously that that can happen. And that probably leads a little bit into the guidance, but I'm really interested in how that's set up.
It does a little bit. I must admit, I was quite impressed with how they've written this in. In each of the chapters, it makes the assumption that the players will be supreme in that they'll beat the rivals at every step. But they do go into quite a good amount of detail in each chapter that talks about, but if they're too late, if they take more than 20 turns to do this, if it takes more than a day to get from point A from point B, then the rivals will have done it and this is the outcome. So the whole adventure has multiple pathways plotted out and written out about what happens if the rivals beat you, which is really great. And it goes for almost the entirety of the adventure. So it isn't just a little dip in, dip out. This rivalry continues for, to be honest, for when I'm running it for my group that started last week. This will be going for 12 months. That they'll have a rivalry with this opposite adventuring party, and I can't wait. It looks really, really fun.
Very cool. That's awesome. So that leads us right into, I think we start thinking about the guidance. So you're going to, you've bought in, right? So it's interesting. You want to do it. You're excited. How do you pull it off? How do you make it happen? The first thing I just wanted to mention, and I mentioned it before, is you just have to make sure you think of this other party as antagonists. They're competition. You need to, as a game master, kind of couch those interactions in that. Don't make them evil, just like absolute evil, because then they're just a big bad evil guy that the players want to go and kill. You want them to be interesting in a sense that they're competition, they're rivals, but in the end they're not evil in a sense. There's and this is tough, right? Because this is where you need to role play. You have to role play it kind of as, yes, we're your rivals, we're against you in a way, but we're not out to just kill you. This isn't Games of Thrones where you come in my court and I'm just going to kill you outright. So why would you ever do that? So it's really,
absolutely.
It's really
absolutely.
So,
and the risk, isn't it? The risk is here's a rivalry of 4 or 5 alternative adventurers. The risk is that your players draw swords and it's all over within a minute, right? So you have to remove that direct, aggressive, confrontational violence from the mix immediately in order to be able to develop the RP, develop the interaction, and develop them as a group that is a rivalry rather than an enemy.
so what's a good way of pulling that off to start that interaction, or they're coming together that first time, they're interacting with each other. It's not in the background, right? That's the other thing. This rival is front and center as part of the adventure. It's not something going on in the background where you never really see it and you never really interact with it. You're going to interact with these folks. So James, how do we keep them from going murder hobo right away on on those rivals?
There's a few techniques that I've used in the past, and again the ones that I'm setting myself up to use for Call of the Netherdeep. Technique 1 is you really need to make these characters interesting and make them alive, so that they've got personality quirks. That you've got a very clear idea of who they are, and that they're not necessarily all one-dimensional. So that you might have some more accessible, friendly people within it. You might have some more stern ones, but they're not kind of gruff, hard-edged, reluctant to talk kind of characters. You need to have them with the ability to RP. You need to have them somewhat approachable. The second one for me is have it so that it's set up in a way that doesn't allow for immediate confrontation.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in my courtier intrigue, for example, despite the fact that the courtiers were literally on the opposite faction and potentially in league with evil, I made sure that first engagement happened in a place that was protected, in that it was a neutral festival where no violence was to be tolerated. There was some repercussions for if you drew swords there, and the whole thing was set up as a losing face reputational kind of interaction rather than a violent interaction. And Call of the Netherdeep does it in a similar way, in that it's set in a small town with a heavy armoured garrison, so that, if a brawl broke out, it would be broken up by the soldiers rather than turn into a deadly encounter where you would kill the rivals on first contact. So protecting the rivals a little bit and then making them interesting, so to allow you to get past that first interaction and get into the good stuff, which is the role-playing and bits and pieces. Whereas mechanically, you could do things as well, which is a little bit cheaty. Make sure that the rivals are a good deal more powerful than the player characters as well. So that
do you think that really will stop player characters? Lots of times folks will go and they'll say, "Oh, look, a dragon, and I'm first level, but I'm still going to attack it because that's just what I do."
I'm still going to attack it. Yes, that's true, but I guess if you have your rivals strong enough and tough enough that they may be able to survive the first couple of rounds of combat in order to start the conversation of, "Hey, I wasn't in for this, you're all a bit serious for me," and you're able to kind of back it off a little bit without it escalating into a full violent confrontation, which is difficult if one of the guys gets one shot, and then suddenly you're locked into a confrontation, if that makes sense. So having them robust physically enough to be able to handle it if you have that trigger, if they have that trigger happy player that just wants to fight, I think that's an important thing to set up in the beginning. And that's kind of first contact. Anything you would add?
Just make sure they have an out side of it too, right? If the players are that kind and they're going to go right after them, just like you said, there's something there that just stops them, backs up. You can't get to them. They're just going to leave, and they lost that opportunity to RP. We'll come back to it, right? Because they're going to be going and doing things that go against the player's interest. They're going to come back. At some point, we're really going to bring them back to that conversation. So if the players decide they want to attack them day one, that's fine. Step it back. They'll just leave because they're powerful enough to get out of the situation, and they're going to come back. And it's going to be a more interesting interaction the next time. They might not be as jovial. But again, they're not the evil guys. They're not out to crush the players. They're just out to accomplish their own their own goals. And in some cases, the players are just an annoyance to them because they're trying to accomplish their own goals as well.
Absolutely.
But I love the idea of neutral ground. That's if they're forced to not draw swords and they have to talk, it's a great opportunity to build up that relationship, because I think that's the big thing, right? Is make sure that this is a recurring thing. They're coming back, they're seeing them again and again, and they're building a relationship because these are hopefully interesting NPCs. And so this relationship, they're learning more about them. So the quirkiness of the one character that they're talking to is interesting, and it's compelling. But in the end, hey, this person is against me. But boy, they're interesting. I love talking to this group because they've got a lot of fun stuff to go through. So,
and they can love to hate them too, which is fine.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, that guy is damn annoying, and if it wasn't for the guard here, I would slap him silly. But it's still an interesting character that they're role playing with.
Yeah, so recurring and personalize them for sure. And I think you mentioned it, James, that each one could have their own interesting personality. That you don't want them to be cardboard cutouts. All one big entity. So go ahead.
Yeah, you don't want it to be a true mirror. You don't want them. Oh, you've got a brooding rogue, so therefore there's a brooding rogue. You don't want to be doing that. You want to provide these with full color. One thing that I love to look at in rival groups is the Montague and Capulet kind of setup, the Romeo and Juliet vibe, where yes, you're a rival house, but there can be friendships that can be formed between rivalries. So particularly look for those players or the characters that aren't as broody, confrontational, haughty, aggressive, that might be more collaborative, as the player might be a collaborative player, or the character in particular might be really interested in lore. So you might have the two wizards of the group getting together and starting to share notes between the rival and so I like to look for opportunities where you can start the seeds of friendship. Start the seeds of friendship between the rivals, so that again, if all hell does break out and you have this issue of confrontation, then you have a voice of reason. Go, no, that guy's okay. Hey, let's step it back a bit, so that you provide different touch points, different layers. Because ultimately, I think what you would find when you bring a rival group in, there are going to be people that will be headstrong oppositional to the rival, and you probably have the haughty person in the rivalry too that says, I don't care about you either. You need to temper that with both the player on the player character side and the NPC on the NPC's character side that has the opportunity to try and bind them together, if you can find one.
That's very interesting. That's for a game master is very light hand, right? That's going to be tough, but it's very fascinating to have. How do you get these rivals, somebody connected together where they have that opportunity? They're sharing notes, or they're interacting in a positive way, while this overall, toughness of. I had something similar in my Deadlands Lost Colony, where it wasn't necessarily a rival, but this person, the players, they were convincing one of the players to deliver something for them through an intermediary, and the players constantly were like, "This guy's evil. We just can't do this for them." But they never destroyed the item. It's like, well, we'll just hide it here, and then the guy snuck around, and it was all his minions trying to get them to do what he wants them to do. And every time they were like, well, we can't do that because this guy's evil. Well, it turns out he's not evil at all. He's trying to make amends for evil acts he did do in the past, and he needs what the players have to basically save the world. And he wants the players to help him. So it's not quite the same, but I think it's that nuance of working together. The one player was kind of the voice of reason, like, we should at least hear him out. Let's talk to this guy, and this minion of his, we don't kill him outright. Let's understand what they're all about, and let's meet them. And it's tough, but it's very interesting when that happens, I think. So,
and it is subtle, but you don't have to be overly subtle with it either. I had the leader of the rivals that was being deliberately haughty. saying, "Well, you're no match for us. We shall endure in the end. And it's nice to know you're in a good, healthy competition, but my commiserations early." And of course, that gets the loud people's back up, going, "We're going to crush you to nothing." And while they're having that argument, I just had an ogre just wander over to the quieter player and just go, "I really like your shirt," and just change the focus of the story, so that you can show that. And often you'll have to do this with the NPC. You will have to be the conciliatory one that starts the side conversation with the person that you think is likely to be friend. How did you do that? That was impressive magic. That kind of. You have the conciliatory NPC ready to go to make that friendship approach, because if you're waiting for the players to be the friends, it's probably unlikely to happen straight up. They'll go straight into rivalry and competition,
or escalate right away, because there's
Yep.
no friendliness there at all. So good, excellent point. So how do we? So we're talking about this rivalry. We're bringing people in, and how do we get the players to want to keep driving forward, other than there's that time frame, the overall adventure? But how do we get them to kind of, I don't know, what's the term I'm looking for? Get agitated, or get cranky about this rival party, that they really are rivals, and we want to, we really want to make them lose. And so that's so one of the things I mentioned was, this living world. Maybe they're coming into the area, and they're the big bad adventurers, but there's already extraordinary tales of this other group that came through and solved the problem that they were supposed to solve. Or I mentioned they go into the magic shop and it's already cleared out because these other party is going into the dungeon, and it's like, wait, that was our dungeon we're going into. So there's lots of ways of having the world, when they're interacting with the world, they know those other folks are there, and that there's something they're doing that it's like, well, we got to get there first next time. Next time we're going to be better. And so that's a couple of thoughts. So you have any other thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this takes a little bit of writing, because you need to, and what you need to be writing is the touchstones of competition. So a rivalry isn't a rivalry unless you're actually competing against each other. So
Exactly.
have a think about what is that first competition. What is the thing that's going to set them up as rivals to begin with, and then what are going to be the second, third, possibly fourth competitive thing that they'll be competing against each other. And I'll keep going back to a Call of the Netherdeep. There is literally a race in that game, so that both rivals have a timed race to get to a point in a dungeon. So it's like a fast clearing dungeon race where you're tracking rounds. In my rival courtiers, it was setting up for a dance, and so there was both a speech, a performance, and a little bit of subtle intrigue that everyone knew that both rivalries would be competing and would be doing a similar vein. So there, you have to set up the competitions, and then ultimately you have to then role play a gallant victor or a humble defeated, depending on whether the NPC wins or not, so that you can set it up for the next one. Because ultimately what you're doing is a long game of role play here. You're doing a first contact, a build, an even bigger crescendo, and ultimately we might be moving towards an actual confrontation where these guys might actually fight each other in the future. But that endpoint is what you're building towards. So it's about subtle competitions and placing them in your story where you're pitting them directly against each other. That's in my take. That seems to be the best model I've used in the past.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. It's just like any other adventure prep, right? You need to know what you're trying to present, and in the case of a rival party, what are they trying to accomplish, and how does that accomplishing that is competitive with what the players are trying to accomplish. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. Great way of stating that. But
a really good way to do this, and is a common foe early in the piece as well. If they are racing each other through a dungeon, if they are racing each other on an overland trail, if they're searching for something before the others search for it, there is the possibility of them having to assist each other against a common enemy, which I think works very, very well to kind of smooth out the relationship in a lot of ways. Again, I'm going to keep going back to it, sorry, but in Call of the Netherdeep, the group that gets through the dungeon first, and there's some spoilers ahead if you're playing this game, they end up fighting a monster within the dungeon, and either the group can help the rivals defeat the monster, or the rivals turn up in the nick of time to help the group defeat the monster, so that there is a rivalry, but they can also assist each other because, as you say, the rivals aren't evil. The rivals are still part of the world, and they can still be kind of interrupted as well. So another great way to instill rivalry, but also in a more collaborative way.
Yeah, and that we see that in cinema a lot, right? Where people come together against a common foe, and once the common foe's defeated, it's like, all right, now we're back to, oh, thank you for defeating that. Wait, where did they go? They're already down the hallway trying to get the prize while we're finishing up. Well, you darn rivals! Why would you do that? And the game's afoot again. So, so obviously we want the rivals to grow as the players grow, right? So as the player characters go up in level and get more skill, we want to make sure that the rivals also level up, so to speak, or get better at what they do as time progresses so that they can continue to be a rival. They can continue to be competition and not just be steamrolled over. I don't know if there's a lot to say about that other than, these folks need to grow and progress as the players grow and progress. I think Call of the Netherdeep does that too. Go ahead.
They do. Call of the Netherdeep provide you with multiple stat blocks as you go through each chapter so that the rivals increase. But there is a little trick that I've already started to think about. One thing you do have to do with rivals is actually a little bit of note keeping. You do need to actually take notes about who was interacting with who and, who put off what. But one thing I like to do is have the rivals learn from the adventurers. So let's say that in my court rival situation, one of the groups uses a magical ability in order to persuade the crowd of their speech. The next time that they're interacting in the similar vein against the rivals, then why not have the rival with a counter spell or learning the same ability in order to, you don't have them static. So as you're leveling them up, it's perfectly okay, I think, for them to kind of learn from the players and then adapt to what the players are doing as well. So either a straight counter to that or adopting some of the strategies where actually you're watching the rivals in the same vein as what you would normally do. They're doing a similar approach. Damn it, they learn from us. You can get those kind of those elevations that aren't necessarily just straight stats and lets them learn.
Use the sports analogy, right? Let your rivals watch the film and learn the players' plays as they go. So very cool. Now, what about that final confrontation when it all comes together? What can a game master do to kind of ensure that that's interesting? It works out. What do you think, James? What's some of your thoughts on that, since you've gone through this a couple of times?
Yeah, it's first of all, it's really epic. Like it's a huge thing. If you've set this up right and you've had multiple interactions and you might have gone for months where they've been working with the rivals, you may have friends that have formed, but you are competitive. They may have had a falling out, and the group then decides, no, enough's enough. These guys have turned their way to the dark side, and we do need to confront with them. I think you need to be set it. There's two ways to set it up, but ultimately it's either the end of the story or the end of the chapter where you're saying, this is it. We're finishing the rivalry one way or the other. There's two ways to approach it. The first one is you end up as allies, where you're fighting against the big bad evil guy, and then you can really highlight the tragedy of when each of the rivals falls, or the rival gives their life for one of the PCs, or they end up fighting together back to back against an overwhelming horde. Makes it for epic storytelling, and you know that you've accomplished that bit. Or the opposite is true when they've become the relationship's irretrievable, that for whatever reason, because of the story, that you need to have that final confrontation with them. And that's where I think you have even more room for tragedy in the Montague and Capulet Romeo and Juliet vibe, where the different houses end up having to, with tear in their eye, turn against each other. The friends suddenly pick their party over their friendship and have to fight it. So giving the final confrontation enough time. This is one that you really do want to spend a lot of time preparing, because this will be a fight that you'll have wonderful little vignettes between the NPC and the PCs. There's plenty of time for soliloquies and plenty of time for grand statements of RP while you're in the middle of that combat. But right. It makes for really, really epic storytelling. I
these
thoroughly
people aren't
recommend it if you
faceless.
can do it.
Right. I mean,
That's right.
A lot of big bad evil guys are kind of faceless, and they just come in and chuckle evilly while they're inserting their plans, but they're somewhat cardboard cutouts. These people have real lives. The players know their history and their life, and was part of their life. So anything that happens, you want to make sure you think about. It's truly going to be a tragedy, one way or the other, for these players. And
will form friendships forever. Like if they end up joining together, then those that survive the final battle, can say, it's been a wonderful rivalry. I retire now, and you keep the field, kind of thing. And so it makes for really great role playing.
And it's really, and what's exciting is a lot of players put this kind of stuff in their backstory. So this is them actually creating that backstory, as opposed to just in my backstory I did this thing, and so now I've got this contact. You really have created this contact, and if it's a chapter in a greater campaign, like you have a campaign that goes on for years and years and years, always somebody they can call on when the chips are down and remember the good old days, like Dragonlance, right? They all come back to the inn and reminisce, and then they go back on the next adventure together.
And imagine that the rival that stood with you against the evil guy in 6 months' time, and everything's in trouble and all hell's breaking loose, and you're set to fail, and then out of nowhere comes the rival back again to help out for one last time. You can bring them back, which is awesome.
Very, very cool. So let's talk. Is there any couple of bullets, lessons? I think we hit a lot of the guidance there, but any other lessons? A couple of quick hits that a game master might want to think about from the books you've been reading or adventures.
More of a recap in some ways, in that make these characters full and interesting. Try and give them a little bit of depth and personality to make them likable, but a rival nonetheless. Set it up in a nice neutral place so that the opportunity for escalation and combat isn't there. Keep good notes and have the rivals kind of develop as you go, in both story and in ability. I think would be the main points that I'd be looking at in setting up your rival group.
Okay, I can never do a rival now because I don't take good notes. Oh, darn. I guess I'll never run one. So yeah, those are really I think the key points. But as we do all the time on this podcast, we talk about players. Advice for players. Now, this seems very GM centric, but what can the players do to make this a fun, exciting turn of events? My obvious one is, I'll just say, don't murder the rivals, but we've already covered that a little bit. Don't go murder hobo. If the game master is presenting some interesting people, maybe interact with them before you kill them. Just, it might be interesting, to learn more about them. And James, like you said, if one of those folks opens an avenue, like, hey, that was a cool spell. How'd you do that? Let me understand. Hey, look at my spell component pouch. It's really cool. What do you think about yours? Take that, pull that hook in and start talking to them and see what you can learn about them and what makes sense.
And drive home some, and look for commonality too, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, ultimately the role-playing elements and role-playing with the Dungeon Master and role-playing the NPCs is one of the great joys of tabletop role-playing games. It's what sets us aside from computer games and what sets us aside from board games. So when when the storyteller's leaning in hard, and it's obvious that they're trying to make someone likable, play the game. Kind of be open to the idea of having a rival. Indiana Jones does not aggressively fight or shoot Belloc at every opportunity. True, Belloc has often got the upper hand and has got guns drawn, but it's certainly not rude. It's a rivalry, and so look for it. And if it looks as though that's what your storyteller's presenting with you, lean on in, because it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Truer words could not be said. So excellent. Very cool. So, hey, that I think was a great take on it. I will keep thinking about how I can take advantage of rival adventuring parties as I continue going forward, because it's always an interesting concept. Probably not so much in this game, the space game I'm doing, unless the universe itself is a rival adventuring party, which it's not. But we'll see how we can incorporate that. So great work, James. Good thoughtful advice. So
thanks, Carl, and I'll keep you tracking on this one. I'm really interested in how the Call of the Netherdeep runs. I'm kind of, I've done this before, but I'm interested to see how it works when it's set up so well within the published adventure. So we'll keep you posted about how it's tracking.
We'll see how the published adventure stands up to what's the term?
First contact.
First contact with the enemy or whatever. Yeah, first contact with the players.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Hey, thanks everyone for tuning in, and hopefully you got something out of it. Remember to drop by masteringtherpg.com to learn about projects, support, send email, all that good stuff. You can send email to gamemaster@masteringtherpg.com. If you have a question, need some advice, and Eric would love adjudicating some differences of opinion. He would love that. So join us for that. And you also can catch us on Twitter @masteringtherpg. So if you like the show, we'd love positive reviews in your podcatcher of choice, and we'd love you to keep listening to the show and let others know about it, and maybe post on social media episodes that you enjoy. So anyway, once again, this is Carl with James and normally Eric, and I'll say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.